If you're looking for help with your climbing training and projecting process, Matt Pincus is currently taking a few new clients as a climbing coach. You can work with him from anywhere in the world, and he'll create a program for you that's based on your abilities, goals, equipment available to you, and the time you have available to train. And he'll put that into the True Coach app, where he'll also be available to answer questions, just encourage you, and help you through your climbing. You can find that at trainingbeta.com/Matt. This is the Training Beta podcast, and I'm your host, Neely Quinn. Thanks for joining me for another episode all about rock climbing. I took a couple weeks off of the podcast. I went and visited my family in Chicago. It was really fun. My brother has 5 kids, and I got to see my mom and sister and my entire family. So it was really great break. And now I'm excited to be back on the podcast to do something a little bit different. I don't have an interview for you today per se, but I got an email a couple months ago from a guy who was like, "Hey, I don't know what to do on my rest days. Do I do a little bit of hangboarding? Do I do some running or something aerobic? And what do the pros do?" And he even said, like, you could even do a podcast episode about this. And I thought it was a great idea because I think a lot of people are confused about what they should do on their rest days. So I asked a lot of elite climbers to tell me what they do on their rest days. And some of them sent me voice memos and some of them sent me just emails. So I have messages from Lynn Hill, Alex Honnold, Katie Lamb, Emily Harrington, Bill Ramsey, which is one of the people who the guy who emailed me specifically requested, Dusty Rasnick, who I'll tell you all about all these people as the episode goes on, but Hazel Findlay, Jonathan Siegrist, Paige Claassen, Matt Pincus, who's a coach here, Sam Elias, and then Alex Stiger, who's also a coach here, obviously, and her partner, Luke Parady. So I got quite a few answers. I'll throw my own answer in there too. I do not consider myself anywhere close to any of these people in their climbing ability, but I'll just throw my opinion in there too. So what I'm going to do is kind of introduce each of these people and give you a little bit of a bio on them, and then tell you what they said or play you what they said, and then move on to the next one. So I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope that it's helpful. I want to caveat this by saying that I don't necessarily think that we should do what pros do. I really don't. I think that pros are pros for a lot of reasons. One, they have, and maybe some people are going to not be happy about me saying this, but they do have, a genetic proclivity to being a really good athlete, right? And some of us just don't have that. Number 2, they're well trained. Like, they've been training forever and ever. They have a very high level of fitness. And so some of them can do more on their rest days than maybe you or I could because we're not as fit. And some people can just tolerate more exercise. But what I will say is the main theme with this is that most of them are doing a lot less probably than you think they are, which I find to be, it was kind of what I wanted to show, because what I find in my coaching sessions for nutrition and mindset with people is that people are generally doing too much. And it's making them tired, and it's overtraining them. It's making them feel burnt out. And they're just not resting enough. And so I always wonder, what more could this person do if they did less, which is, counterintuitive, but that's kind of where I was hoping to go with this. And it's awesome to see that a lot of these pros do just that, like absolutely nothing on their rest days. But so I asked them a series of questions. I asked them 3 questions. And it was, how many days a week do you climb when you're projecting? And what about when you're in a training cycle? Number 2, what do you do on your rest days in terms of physical activity when you're projecting? So meaning projecting outside, I guess that could be inside too. And what about when you're in a training cycle? So what do you do on your rest days when you're in a training cycle versus when you're like outside projecting? And number 3, how old are you and how long have you been climbing? So I'll start with me. So the first question was, how many days a week do you climb when you're projecting? And what about when you're in a training cycle? So for me, if I'm projecting something, I'm probably going out to it 3 or 4 days a week. And I'm resting the other days. Maybe I'll go for a walk. Maybe I'll stretch on my rest days. Maybe I'll do something around the house, but I'm never training. I'm never doing anything when it's an off day. Like when I'm exercising, those are my exercise days, and that's typically 3 to 4 days a week, period. I used to be able to climb 2 days on, but I haven't really trained for that in a long time, and my body just doesn't like climbing 2 days on anymore, so I just don't do it. And that's about it for me. It's the same if I'm training or if I'm projecting. So a lot of times if I'm projecting something, I'll either do 1 day on, 1 day off, and then have 2 days off in there. So, like every couple cycles of that. Or if I'm projecting something and I'm close, I'm 1 day on, 2 days off so that I'm as fresh as possible. I just want to be able to feel really good every time I climb. And then I am 47 and I've been climbing for 28 years. All right, so I'm going to get started here, and I'm going to start with one where they just wrote something in. And that person is Katie Lamb. Katie Lamb is a boulderer. She's amazing. She was on the Training Beta podcast a while back talking about how she approaches things. We actually talked a little bit about rest on that episode because she talked about how her skin was so bad on a project that she just would spend entire days and nights like in her tent, just like chomping at the bit, waiting until her skin was good enough to climb again. But anyway, she's climbed V16, V15. She's so friggin' strong. And also you can find her on Instagram where she is very introspective. And I just want to read you this thing, this post that she did about the dark side, the V16. 9 weeks ago, she says, "Despite everything in this world that is built to minimize friction, there are moments of stickiness for a scaler. And in these high-stakes times, when it becomes clear all the ways we could have been more ready, the most important thing is to just show up to the session." I don't know. When I read that, when she put it out, I was like, that is beautiful. So, all right, here's what she has to say about rest days. So, how many days a week do you climb when you're projecting? What about when you're in a training cycle? She says, in my most recent training cycle, I've been doing 2 days on, 1 day off. So climbing 4 or 5 days a week. When I'm climbing outside or projecting, I'll usually go 1 day on, 1 day off. So 3 to 4 days a week. And if I'm close on my project, I'll often take 2 days off between sessions. And that's kind of what she was talking about in the episode too. Number 2, what do you do on your rest days in terms of physical activity when you're projecting? What about when you're in a training cycle? She says, if I'm climbing outside, then I'll sometimes do light hikes on my rest days. If I'm in a training cycle, I'll occasionally have a day of only lifting or other non-climbing exercise. She says, when I asked, how old are you and how long have you been climbing? She's 27 and climbing for 20 years. Again, this person is highly trained, been climbing since she was a child in a competitive way. So that was from Katie Lamb. I hope that's helpful. Basically, once again, she's not doing much on her rest days, right? And she's very intentional about when and how often she's taking them. Okay. All right, so the next one is Bill Ramsey. Bill Ramsey is 65 years old. He lives in Las Vegas. He's a philosophy professor. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for a really long time, and I've had him on the podcast before. So for all of these people, if you just go to Training Beta and use the search box and put their name in, you'll be able to find the episode. but Bill is an animal. Like when I had him on the podcast, we talked about his training cycle, and then at that point he was probably like 59, and he does so much, and he used to do a lot more. And so when I chatted with him on the phone about this topic of rest, and he was like telling me all these things that he does on his rest days, and I was like, all right, hasn't changed a bit. But he's still climbing 14. Like he just sent 514A just recently. He actually just did an episode on the Ageless Athlete podcast, which you can find on YouTube, about how he climbs so hard at the age of 65. So anyway, here's what Bill has to say about rest, and I'll meet you on the other side of this.
Okay, so when I'm projecting, I often climb about 3 days a week. Like right now, it's a summertime, so I'm not teaching. So this week I'm climbing Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday with 2 days of rest between each day. So I'm 65. I've been climbing for about 50 years. And for me, the rest day formula goes something like this. After one rest day, I feel like I used to feel on second day on. After 2 rest days, I feel like I used to feel after 1 rest day. 3 rest days feels like 2 rest days used to feel like, and so on. So most of the time, I'm really trying to get in at least 2 rest days with an occasional 3 days off if I go really big or if my schedule demands it. Now, on my rest days, I always try to do something aerobic. So I used to go for runs, but with my hip replacement, I'm really not supposed to run. So instead, I typically go for a bike ride, or I use the Stairmaster, or actually lately, I've been going for hikes. This route I'm trying to do is up at a really high elevation on Mount Charleston. So I think it actually helps to go hiking up at Mount Charleston at a high elevation on my rest days. So then I feel a little less winded when I'm actually climbing on it. Other than my work, another thing I do on my rest days is some weightlifting, a little bit of core training, but really nothing too extreme. I also do a lot of stretching. I feel like it's really hard to get stronger when you're older, but you can get a lot more flexible, and I think that really can come in handy at times. And lately, I've actually been doing this no-hang protocol where I just lift something like 45 pounds with each hand on a 20 millimeter edge, about 6 times, 20-second rest in between. And I'm doing that just to kind of engage my fingers a little bit on rest days. Nothing terribly taxing, just to kind of engage them. I should also say that I really don't engage in any kind of training phase part of the year, and then at another time I do a climbing phase for another part of the year. In truth, I actually more or less combine those. So in other words, I climb and train on the same days. Although, of course, there's phases where I'm emphasizing one a lot more than the other. Now, I used to try to train after climbing, but it's actually really hard to do. You feel pretty beat up. A lot of times you're going out to dinner. So lately I've been getting up early to train before going climbing. See, the problem with projecting is you tend to lose finger strength. And you tend to get weak in various ways. So you want to be able to do some kind of maintenance training while you're projecting. Now, no one wants to train before going climbing because they think it'll diminish their performance on the rock. And yes, it probably does diminish it a little bit. But you can still make really substantial progress, really substantial gains on your project. And moreover, at least in the early phase of your project, you're not really trying to send it anyhow. See, what you need to think about is really not how you're going to feel today on the rock, at least on the early phase, but how you're going to feel 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks down the road when you're really getting close to sending. You want to be feeling really, really strong then when it really matters. So my view is you sacrifice some performance early on in the process to maximize your performance down the road. Even on the days when I've sent, like I just recently did this 514, I did some max hang training that morning before going to the cliff. Okay, out.
All right, so that was great. Thanks, Bill. And that was really descriptive. I hope that that is helpful for you. So he's an example, obviously, of a person who is very high energy. He really likes moving his body, and he does a little bit more, I would say, on his rest days than maybe some other people. And it's working for him, like, obviously. Okay, so the next person I'm going to talk about is Emily Harrington. I'm sure you've heard of Emily, and I'm going to take from her website, emilyharrington.com, her about. because it's really short but thorough. Emily Harrington is one of the most successful and versatile professional climbers in the world. She's a 5-time U.S. national champion, has completed numerous first female ascents of 514 routes, summited Mount Everest, and made a complete ski descent of Cho Oyu, the world's 6th tallest peak. This past November, Harrington became the first woman to free climb Golden Gate on El Capitan in under 24 hours, making her the 4th woman in history to free climb El Cap in a day. She currently resides in Tahoe City, where she spends her time training, climbing, and skiing with her partner, Adrienne Bellinger, and their dog, Cat. She has a child now, Arrow, and she recently just climbed her first 514A since having her child. So things are a little bit different for her now, but this is what she had to say. Question 1, how many days a week do you rest when you're projecting? What about when you're in a training cycle? She says, I rest from climbing 2 to 3 days a week when training and probably 3 to 4 days when projecting. It really depends on how I feel though. I honestly think I could rest more if my brain could handle it. I'm getting a bit better at it since having a kid because I don't have as much time anymore and I'm just more tired in general. 2, what do you do on your rest days in terms of physical activity when you're projecting? And what about when you're in a training cycle? She says, I tend to do something that's cardio related, like a short run or even just walking and stretching. Traditionally, that's been mainly for my mind because complete rest was hard for me. More and more, however, I've been able to take real rest days and enjoy just doing nothing. 3, how old are you and how long have you been climbing? She says, I'm 38 and have been climbing for 28 years. Okay, so thank you, Emily, for that. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to move on to another recorded one. So the next person I'm going to talk about and have you listen to is Dusty Rasnick. And Dusty is a friend of mine. He's a really good friend of Matt Pincus's. And they've been working on projects this summer at Wolf Point. So I asked Matt to get a recording from him, and he kindly did. So Dusty is a restaurant owner. He's a father and husband. He's a busy guy, but he still makes a lot of time for rock climbing. And he's sent numerous 514As and Bs and lots of 513s. I've climbed with him. He's a really good climber and very intentional about how he spends his time. So here's what Dusty has to say.
Generally, I climb 2 to 3 days on the project when I'm projecting and 1 day of indoor climbing. And when I'm in a training cycle, I climb 3 to 5 days a week, pretty much all indoors. On rest days, I work, which usually entails some physical activities. Every once in a while, I'll do hangboarding or some weights on rest days.
Thanks again, Dusty. And I'm going to do another written one now. So this person is Alex Honnold, who really needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. So Alex he's not from, but he lives in Vegas. He is famous for free soloing Free Rider, which is the 13A on El Cap. He has also done a lot of hard sport routes. So up to 14D, debatably. I was looking on 8A, and the 9A that he's done has been downgraded to 14C or 8C+. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, he's done a bunch of 14 pluses, 14s, and he's very, very strong. He's also extremely motivated. Like, that guy is always doing something. He adventures a lot. I don't know if he knows how to sit still. And so what he said was really interesting. So his answers were, Hi, Neely. That's a good idea for a podcast. Fittingly, I'm typing this from a plane while I enjoy my, in quotes, rest day. I'm flying to Boston for a day for a corporate thing. It'll be my 2 days of, in quotes, rest for the week. So question 1, how many days a week do you climb when you're projecting? What about when you're in a training cycle? He says, I generally climb 5-ish days a week, mostly because I really like climbing. The intensity varies a lot depending on what I'm working on, but I just like climbing more than doing anything else. Number 2, what do you do on your rest days in terms of physical activity when you're projecting? What about when you're in a training cycle? He says, when I'm really projecting, I often entirely rest on my rest days, as in no physical activities, though that normally means doing work stuff, events, podcasts, travel, etc., or family stuff. So it rarely feels quite like rest used to. In training modes, depending on what I'm aspiring to do that season or year, I often do light cardio on my rest days, either a hike or run or some easy soloing, but that really depends on time. If it were up to me, I would go for an adventure in the mountains on every rest day, but then my kids would be feral and I wouldn't be able to support my family, so it's all a balancing act. 3, how old are you and how long have you been climbing? I'm turning 40 this summer and I've been climbing 30 years. Makes me feel old. So he does a lot, but he's still being really intentional about his rest and doing nothing on his rest days when he's really trying hard on his on days. So thank you so much for that, Alex. I really appreciate it. Alex has his own podcast, if you didn't know. I'm sure you did, Climbing Gold. And so you can listen to him more there. Okay, so I'm going to do another recorded one. And this is from Hazel Findlay, who is one of my climbing idols, I guess I would call that. She's short, and she's also extremely strong and extremely brave. So I always look up to that. So from her website, hazel-findlay.com, this is like on her about page. She says, Hazel was the first woman to climb a British trad route at E9 and the first British woman to sport climb 8C and free El Capitan in Yosemite, which she has now done 4 times. She has put up first ascents in many countries worldwide, including Big Walls in Greenland. Hazel has also red pointed 9A, 514D sport and 14C, 8C plus, E10, 11 trad. Loves all types of climbing, from bouldering to alpine climbing, and is especially interested in the mental challenge that climbing evokes. So she also runs Strong Mind, and she's a coach for mindset, and she was my coach for mindset. So I really have so much respect for Hazel. So this is what she had to say about resting.
Hey Neely, Hazel here, responding to your questions about resting. We do have a builder in the house, so sorry if there's annoying background noise. How many days a week do you rest when you're projecting? So usually when I'm projecting, I'll climb like a day on, a day off. I think that this is like optimal for skin, as well as like rest, and then every now and again probably have 2 days off in a row. In a training cycle, probably train, and that's quite hard to say, to be honest, because it depends how long my sessions are, and probably like 3 days rest a week though on average. What do you do on your rest days in terms of physical activity when you're projecting? I tend to not do that much, but I tend to try to still move. So like I'll go for like a hike, for example. I don't really run. I used to run, but probably when projecting towards like sending the project, I wouldn't run. And then I do like stretching and yoga, and like probably just like a bit of light, like prehab type stuff. In training cycle, it's like normal life. So probably a bit more active. But yeah, not anything too crazy, like walking, hiking. But I also like working, and then now I have a baby, like a lot of dealing with a baby, which is quite active in a way, because you're like lifting this sort of like 10 kilo weight all day. I am 36 years old and I've been climbing for like 30 years. So yeah, that's my answers. Hope that's interesting. Doesn't sound very interesting to me. Anyways, yeah, hope you're doing well.
All right, thank you, Hazel, for that. And if you want to work with her on your mindset, She has programs at strongmindclimbing.com. She did not ask me to plug her. I'm just doing it because she was so helpful to me and she's just great. So that was Hazel. I'm going to do another written one from Lynn Hill. And this is another one who really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do one for her anyway. So Lynn she was the first woman to climb a route rated 512D in 1979. So she's old school, right? OG. And she continued to climb routes at the highest standards of difficulty over the years to follow. And this is from her website, lynhillclimbing.com. And she was the first woman to do a route graded 514 in 1991, 3 years before any other woman. And in 1992, Lynn was the first woman to make an on-site ascent of a climb rated 513B. So then, as we all know, she ended up being the first person to free the nose, and she did it in the day. The nose on El Cap, which was 514A. So she's a badass. And here's what she said to my questions. She says, "Hi, Neely. I am not currently projecting any particular route now, but if I was, my training probably wouldn't change much. I fit climbing into my lifestyle as possible, which means that ideally I climb 4 days per week if I'm not traveling for work or family visits. I climb a few times a week at the gym or more depending on the season and the weather. I like to train power on the kilter board, a bit of hangboard training as part of my warm-up, and try to lift weights once per week. I'm 64 years old and have been climbing for 50 years. I usually go for a walk on my rest days. My dog died 6 months ago, so I used to walk more often. I've gone mountain biking recently since I'm dating a guy who is a serious skier, mountain biker, and trad climber. By the way, I've noticed that it's increasingly important to warm up progressively to be prepared for powerful efforts." So basically, she's still climbing quite a bit at the age of 64, and she's still sending 513s. Like, I was working on one last year that she had just done, this 13B at Staunton. So she's still crushing. All right, that concludes all of my written responses. The rest are recordings from people. And the next person I'm going to talk about is Jonathan Siegrist. Jonathan is an amazing rock climber. So amazing. They all are. But Jonathan is ranked on A-Day. He's ranked 3rd in routes in the world and number 1 in the United States. And he has sent 7 9Bs or 15Bs, 25 9A pluses or 15As, 57 9As, and 89 8C pluses. I won't go on. Like, he's prolific, and he spends a lot of his time rock climbing, whether it's outside, which is most of the time, and inside. So I asked him these questions, and here is what he had to say.
Hello, Neely and Training Beta. I am sending you this message from just outside of Lander, Wyoming. I've been climbing at Wolf Point for the last couple weeks, and I'll be here in Wyoming for about another month, and just totally loving it. So I'm here to answer some questions about rest days. I love rest days. It wasn't until probably my early 30s or even late 20s that I realized for me to perform my best, a rest day means absolutely resting. And what I mean by that is that if I do anything that feels in any way physically difficult on a rest day, I've blown it. And so typically, like, let's just take this trip, for instance. This is a great example. So I'm climbing at Wolf Point. It is a very demanding crag. It also requires a 45-minute to an hour approach, which is uphill both ways, unfortunately. So it is a very physical, long day. In a week, I am probably climbing 4 days. Sometimes 5, but most of the time 4. And so the way that takes shape for me would be maybe 2 climbing days, 1 rest day, 1 climbing day, 1 rest day, 2 climbing days, and so on. Like, I'm not just going 2 on, 1 off indefinitely. That would be too much given how demanding this crag is. But at the same time, I'm mixing in a few more climbing days than I would be if I was just climbing day on, day off. I think ultimately day on, day off for me at a crag like this, especially with the long approach, is best. But I'm also conscious of the fact that seasons are short, and sometimes an extra day is valuable even if you're not going to be in peak form, depending on where you are in the projecting process. But anyways, to talk a little bit more about rest days exactly, I'm not kidding when I say I do nothing. I mean, I will do maybe a short walk. I'll grocery shop, do some work on my computer, do some stretching. If I was at home in Las Vegas, I would take the dogs on a walk in the neighborhood for an hour. But I'm not necessarily going on a strenuous hike. I'm certainly not going, running or mountain biking, or even some people go easy climbing and consider that a rest day. To me, that is absolutely not a rest day. Best case scenario on a rest day, I almost entirely forget about climbing and let my body heal, give my mind a break from the difficulties emotionally and mentally of climbing, and just chill. And I think that this is the absolute best and most sustainable way to make the best use out of your climbing days, and actually get some rest so that when you're back on, you can totally crush it. For me, I am currently 39. I will be turning 40 this year, which is a terrifying thought, but I think I'll make it. And I think that was about the end of the questions. If I missed something, tell me, but it's always a pleasure to be part of Training Beta community. And thanks for the questions, Neely.
Okay, again, that was Jonathan Siegrist. And right after he sent me that, I reminded him that there was another question about how is this different during your training periods, like when he's climbing inside mostly. And he just said, basically, it's exactly the same. And he approaches it exactly the same. So that was Jonathan. He's been on the podcast a bunch, but maybe a couple times before. And he's a good friend of mine. And this next person is kind of a segue to that, because I met Jonathan, 15 years ago or something, when he was a route setter at the Boulder Rock Club where I climb. And my husband was also a route setter. And so we hit it off right away and have stayed friends since then. And he was at the time dating Paige Claassen. And Paige and I hit it off through Jonathan and have stayed close since then too. So Paige is very strong, crazy strong. She has sent 5 9As or 14Ds, 5 14Cs, 9 14Bs, and a bunch of other hard stuff. And she also is a really strong boulderer. And right after her first child, like in the year after she had her first child, she sent a V14. So that's Paige, and I'm going to let her tell you about her resting. So here she is.
I'm 35 years old. I've been climbing for 26 years. And when I'm projecting on a trip, I climb day on, day off, or day on, 2 days off, so that I can make the absolute most of my try hard. If I'm able to climb 2 days in a row, that means I did not try hard enough during the day. When I'm trying that hard on a project, my skin gets completely destroyed, and my muscles as well. And since I want to perform at my best every projecting day, I need a lot of rest. If I'm projecting at home, I'll often only try my project once a week, just to scatter in some gym or training days and have more rest. There's just not the same time pressure. When I'm in a training cycle, it's a similar schedule, day on, day off, or day on, 2 days off, but I'm more flexible because I don't have time constraints. So sometimes I would climb 2 days in a row. Some days I would rest more than 2 days in a row. I'm just more flexible based on partners and how my body feels. I kind of just go by my schedule with my kids and how my body's feeling. But I want to show up to every training day at 100% or as close as I can get. So if I need more rest to get there, I'm happy to do that. On my rest days, I chase my children around. So I would actually, in some ways, consider my climbing days more restful than my rest days where I'm chasing children, because that's exhausting and constant. Prior to having children, I did absolutely nothing on rest days. I would try to do as little physical activity as possible so that I could refuel and get my energy levels back up to as close to 100% as they could be for my projecting day. All of my decisions are based around trying my absolute hardest every single time I go climbing, whether I'm projecting or training.
Okay, thank you for that, Paige. And the next person I'm going to talk about is Pincus. So Matt Pincus is a coach for Training Beta, has been for many years. He's also a really good rock climber. So he's done 2 14Bs or 8Cs, 7 14As or 8B pluses, and then a bunch of 513s. He's also a good boulderer, and he's climbed up to V12. So here's what Matt has to say about rest. And he's talked about this on the podcast before, but it is interesting to hear what he has to say about his own stuff. So here is Matt Pincus.
So my typical schedule, whether I'm projecting or in a training cycle, is that I usually climb or train about 3 to 4 days a week. Maybe that's a little slanted towards 4 days a week when I'm training and 3 days a week when I'm projecting. But it stays pretty consistent throughout the year. As far as rest days go, I rest on them, really, whether I'm projecting or training. So there's not much that I'm doing in terms of physical activity. I try to make sure I move around a bit, maybe some light stretching, some foam rolling if something feels tight, something like that. But nothing really structured that I'm trying to accomplish. And honestly, a lot of the physical activity that I end up feeling like I need gets covered just by the demands of daily life, like taking care of things around my property and stuff like that. And so really the one thing I will say, though, is that the difference between when I'm projecting and when I'm training, a lot of it comes down to the emphasis that I place on the quality of my rest. So if I'm in a training cycle, I try to rest on my rest days, but there's more things that I like to do than just climbing. So maybe I ride a mountain bike, maybe I ski, and maybe I do more of the, house projects that I've been putting off. And I'm okay if that impacts some of the quality of my next session more. When I'm in a projecting phase, though, and I'm getting close to this end, I really try to protect the quality of my rest as much as possible. So really comes down to, like I said, some light stretching, maybe a walk, just something to move my body a little bit, but mostly just trying to rest, recover, and show back up to the project as rested and ready as I can to try my hardest.
Thanks for that, Matt. And again, you can listen to him all over the podcast. And he's also taking a few clients right now if you want to work with him. And you can find him at trainingbeta.com/Matt. Quick plug there. All right, the next person that I'm going to talk about is Sam Elias. Interesting thing about Sam, he didn't start climbing until he was 23. But since then, he's done 514D or 9A. He's done 514 minus trad, V12, M13. He's climbed Mount Everest. He's very accomplished. And here's what he has to say about resting.
I climb 3 to 4 days a week when I'm projecting and climbing outside on things that are at or around my red point level. And I climb 4 to 5 days a week when I'm training. If I'm outside climbing and I'm projecting, I'll try to be as restful as I possibly can. On rest days, I'll do a light walk and or some stretching, but that's pretty much all that I'll do physically when I'm trying to red point something hard. During a training cycle, I'm a little bit more active on rest days, normally doing some light cardio and random physical chores and tasks. Normally, I'm at home and there's always something to do around the house or the property, so that's usually some kind of form of movement or manual labor.
All right, thanks to Sam for that. And the last audio that I have for you is from our very own Alex Stiger. And she is speaking about her and her partner, Luke Parady. So Alex has climbed up to 514A. She's done a bunch of 513Ds and a couple of Cs. And she is very intentional about how she spends her time climbing. And then Luke is also a very strong climber, and he has climbed up to 9A or 14D and up to V14 bouldering. So she's going to tell you all about their rest habits. Here we go.
Hey, okay, so I talked to Luke, and here's what he said. He has 2 to 3 rest days per week, and on those days he likes to do minimal physical anything. And I asked him if he thinks of anything different, like with food, with water, nutrition, and he said not necessarily different, or no special food and drinks, just like in general, you have to be healthy all the days, not just when climbing. And I asked him about like cold plunging or things like that, and he said he's trying to decide if he likes cold plunging on rest days or if it feels better like the night before a rest day. And it's undecided, but on his rest day today before going to rifle tomorrow, he thought about cold plunging and decided not to. And he feels like sauna is not ideal on rest days just because of potential dehydration / you don't have as much time to catch back up. And light stretching, but that's kind of an everyday thing. Basically, he was like, rest days should be treated like all the other days, just without climbing. And he has no hard rules about 2 to 3 days on in a row. He does 2 days on really regularly and 2 days off in a row, like once or twice per month. And just a few times a year is 3+ days off in a row, but it's really rare for him to take off more than 2 days. And hanging counts as climbing unless super duper light, and 0 lifting on rest days. And he does like to do a walk with maybe just like a touch of jogging in between, sometimes on rest days, but not all the time. And a big one that he said, which I really liked, was he likes to do like take off the mental load of the climbing day on the rest day. So if there's anything that can be done or needs to be done that he could do on the rest day instead of the climbing day, he does that. So like if the vehicle needs to be gassed up or grocery shopping, like whatever prep stuff can be done just to have more mental energy on the climbing day. And I asked him about visualizing, and he said his visualization Like, he thinks of it as kind of like he thinks about his route all the time, but actually visualizing is a very deliberate, intentional thing. And it's not like he doesn't think about doing it specifically on rest days. It's more like sometimes when in driving or in bed or shower or stretching kind of thing. Okay, so that's Luke. For me, I would say I rest 2 to 3 days per week, and like more often than not, I rest 3 days. Like, it's kind of rare that I only rest 2 days. And I rarely do 2 days on in a row. It's usually 1 day on, 1 day off. And I am not opposed to having like a really light jog or a light lifting session on one of those rest days, but 2 days a week as a pretty hard rule. I like to do absolutely nothing. And I do have nutritional like feels where like I struggled previously with trying to eat less on rest days, and for the last like 6+ years, I make sure to try and eat more on rest days. So I really prioritize getting a bunch of protein and food in and drinking lots of water if I can. And I really try and keep alcohol consumption pretty low on rest days. If I want to like feel buzzed, I try and make sure to do that after climbing day before a rest day, not on a rest day before a climbing day. And I like to stretch, and I only like to jog if I've been jogging. So like if I've been running regularly, like if I go for a 20 to 30 minute jog 2 to 3 times a week, and I've been doing that for a couple months, it feels totally fine to do that on my rest days. But if I haven't been consistent, it feels very not fine to do on my rest days. And I'm really, really careful with yoga on rest days because of just kind of stressing my upper body and putting it in positions when it's already kind of tired and compromised. I've had some tweaks happen that way. So I focus more on just like actual just stretching versus like a yoga practice. I usually do yoga like warming up for climbing or on a climbing day before climbing, not on my rest days. And it's not uncommon for me to have 2 days off in a row. I often do that like once a week. So 3 to 4 times per month, I'll have 2 days off in a row. And probably a few times a year, I try and take like a whole week off. And it's not that uncommon for me to have 3 days off in a row, like maybe once a month is on my deload weeks, or like any light week, I try and make sure to have 3 days off in a row. And what else? Okay, I think that's about it. I would say for me, my rest days are my time to dive into other activities I'm really interested in. And one of my biggest mistakes on rest days is that I often do too much of those. So like playing 30 games or 8 hours of StarCraft, and then my forearm's tired for my climbing day. Like I often fall into mistakes like that. So that's what I try and prevent doing. But yeah, it happens. Okay, I hope that helps, and I'm excited to hear what all you hear from people.
So that was Alex Stiger, and she was also talking about her partner, Luke Parady. She went into more detail than everybody else because I actually sent her the original email that I received asking for what do pros and elites do on their rest days. So that's why she went into more detail. I didn't feel like I could ask everybody those questions. It just would have gotten too long. But I hope that you learned something from everyone. And I hope that this kind of format of the podcast was a fun diversion from the normal just interview. I don't know how often I'll do this, but it was certainly fun for me to put it together and to see everybody's answers. So if you need help with your climbing and training and trying to figure out your whole schedule yourself, Matt Pincus is taking new clients right now. He's taking a few people, and he does monthly programming for people, and he's also your coach all the time. So he puts your program in the True Coach app, and then he's there answering your questions, giving you motivation and encouragement, helping you through your projecting process, helping you decide when to rest and when not to. And so you can sign up to work with him at trainingbeta.com/Matt. And that is all I have for you today. So again, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. You can find us at trainingbeta.com and on Instagram at trainingbeta. And I'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. All right, talk to you then.